Chapter 15 Lord de la Fuye's Hunt, or How Reynard Hid Among the Skins. Reynard was only too glad to be free. He left the wolf to bleed and ran away. What could he have done? Isgrim, looking as black as night, was suffering in savage silence. Reynard turned around 2 or 3 times as he ran and saw him walking towards the woods, his eyes downcast, shaking his head from time to time to get rid of the bitter blood that was blinding him. Isgrim would recover. During the last few days, Reynard had had only too much evidence of his ardent vitality to have any doubt about it whatsoever, but the caress of the royal claws had been severe enough to give Reynard the time to breathe comfortably at last. The sunshine of a glorious summer, with noontide skies of a blazing blue and evenings of immutable purity, the feeling of astonishing good luck which accompanied his every step, everything contributed to keep him in a state of continuous and intoxicating happiness. What he wanted was at least to visit Malpas and share his adventuresome happiness with her whom he loved, his dear mate, and also his 3 growing sons. Perhaps the time had come to rely upon them for prey, not calves snatched from the stables, but vigorous wild young hares, the sons of the valiant Goutereau. At this thought he turned a somersault on the spot and set off to Malpas, with the regular smooth trot he adopted for long journeys. He soon reached the woods, jumped over the boundary ditch, and trotted into the undergrowth again. These were the ways he knew. These were the pathways exactly suited to the length of his legs and his lissom back. He burrowed through the thickets and the brambles, drew his paws up to his chin, jumping over the bracken fronds and the wild clematis that trailed across the dead leaves. He went confidently forward, thinking only of Ermelyn and his sons, temporarily forgetting his usual caution. But less than a fox's leap on the pathway was needed for destiny to intervene. An unexpected sound stopped him. It was the sharp hiss of a bloodhound's breathing as he strained at his leash. Malpas! Malpas! It was not at the end of this path, although it was so short that Reynard would finally go down the tunnel to his deep earth. After the wolf came the bloodhound. After Isgrim came Tracer, the dog with the rough, wrinkled forehead whom Beta kept at his heel. He had just scented Reynard. Now! Now! After him, my beauty! After the fox! It had to be Beta too, Lord de la Fuye's master of the hunt, always on the lookout on behalf of his master's equipage, household and guests. He was late in unleashing the dog, but it was done. He sounded his horn until it roused the echoes in the wood. The fox! Horns answered him from all sides. The hounds were unleashed and the whole pack was in full cry. Men and hounds had but one aim. The fox! Attacked at close quarters and hemmed in, Reynard took the only course possible, the great course, the huntsmen say, straightforward flight, with all the power of his legs, as fast and as far as his heart beats, his breath and his courage would allow him. Reynard was the most courageous of all the animals in the wood, for he was bold, tenacious and intelligent. This was a relentless, hard pursuit through the wood, over the plain, the marshes and the field. The hunt was up, riding straight along all together. First the troop of huntsmen galloping, their saddles creaking, their horses snorting, their shouts urging on the dogs, winding their horns until the peasants working in the fields raised their heads from the ground. Leading the riders were the mounted huntsmen, their whips slung round their necks, leaning forward over their horses' withers in order to urge the hounds on more closely. The fox! Ranter! Royster! Sly! Then came the pack, a multicoloured sea of boarhounds and greyhounds crying and barking close together, all of them eager for a kill, tracking down the only hunted beast, the little fox, the tiny russet shape that seemed to drag behind it as it flew along, the whole pack in full cry, the men shouting and the great horses galloping, their hooves throwing up the soil from the fields and veiling the hunt in a golden mist. The fox ran straight ahead all the time. Finally he saw the castle, and its moat with the drawbridge in place and the iron portcullis raised. He crossed the bridge and the postern gate and leapt into the outer courtyard. Then there was excitement, and Lord de la Fuye, raising in his stirrups, waved his arms at length and cried, "He's ours now." Any huntsman would have thought so at the time. The fox had given himself up. He had lowered his head and rushed madly into the trap. It was a big trap for such a small prize, and for such a clever one, for the footmen, chambermaids, and gentlemen of the household searched until evening. Every mattress was turned over, every chest was moved away from the walls, each heap of oats prodded with swords, and all old rags shaken with much to do. There was no fox, not in the great halls, nor in the chambers, nor in the courtyards, the stables, the cellars, nor on the ramparts, nor in the watchman's lookout, nowhere. Not even in the old empty beehive with its black rotten combs that one of the stable boys kicked over. Lady Flora, Lord John's wife, who had fair skin, fair hair, and eyes as blue as the sea, was heartbroken at first when she saw the larded sides of venison that were being roasted for supper becoming as hard as wood. But hands were freshened with the cool scented water from the ewers. Gaiety, torchlight and laughter lit up faces and eyes. Many witty words were spoken about the unsuccessful hunt and the cleverness of the fox, who had disappeared from the sight of everyone. As midnight approached, Lady Flora rose. "It is late, my lord," she said. "Is it not time to go to sleep?" And smiling round the table, with a smile that she knew to be adorable, she said, "Who among you does not want to be ready tomorrow morning to pursue this entertaining fox? I wager he'll make you run again, either through the countryside or through the castle." "Lady," said the knight, when they had withdrawn to their bedchamber, "I wager that I will get him." "Of course you will, my lord," said Flora, as she closed her eyes. They slept in their great canopied bed by the light of 2 tapers burning on a low table, and the next morning the knight called out to his men, "Saddle my roan, quickly! I can hear the horns! Beata has seen the fox again!" In spite of what the guests had said during supper, there was no magic about it. As soon as the bridge was lowered, the fox had leapt out, and when he was sighted, the horns were sounded. So the chase began again, cheerful, hectic, and disorderly, each man rallying to the sound of the horns, galloping over hill and dale, and scouring the countryside. But they might just as well have left their horses in the stable, for long before dusk and the raising of the drawbridge over the moat, the fox ran through the postern gate, entered the castle again, and vanished into thin air. The same thing happened the next day, again. There was a commotion all over the castle, more excitement and noise than when a thief was hanged at Sendless Fair. But they drew a blank. There was no fox. Without renouncing his wager, the knight decided in the morning to hunt other game, a great 4-year-old boar given by a kennel man. They rode after him and caught him as evening fell, after he had torn 2 fine boarhounds to pieces, cracked the skull of another by hurling it against the trunk of an oak tree, and drowned another dog by turning round on him and pinning him under his body as they went through a deep pool. The hunt, the capture, the feeding of the hounds by torchlight, the glow of the brazier in the courtyard where the boar's skin was being roasted, enlivened the talk of the supper guests, but each conversation came back, inevitably, to the cunning fox. "Perhaps it's the famous Reynard, who drowned Constantinois, who arranged for Lamfret the Forester to cut off the bear's tail, who broke open the hogshead of wine that Foucher was carrying, who made the Tyrren monks beat the wolf." And it was definitely decided by everyone, all of them shouting loudly together, "It's Reynard! It's Reynard!" At these shouts, one of the 2 hounds lying at the master's feet uttered a long sigh. "What a board!" said Lord de la Fuye, laughing. "Do you know his name by chance?" And he repeated, as though in jest, "Yes, it's Reynard. It must be." The dog immediately leapt to his feet, and his companion too. Then both of them, followed by the whip, sniffing round the closed room as though they were sniffing at branches, barked 2 or 3 times, as though they were pursuing some creature far away in the forest. They raised their muzzles and looked up at the ceiling, and all the men, looking up in the same way, saw the skins of animals hanging from the rafters to dry. Foxes, badgers, martens and polecats. But, said the young knight, and all at once he called out, Beater! Yes, my lord? How many skins have you got hanging up there? I mean foxes' skins, huntsman. 9, my lord. I can see 10. Each man counted them, and all at once tumult and confusion boiled up like milk on the fire. Madame Flora turned pale and stood up, murmuring, No, don't kill him. Stools were overturned with a crash, and the nimble Beater leapt up onto the end of the table, raising his arms towards the skins. And all at once he uttered a cry. There was a tinkle of broken glass, a ringing laugh from Lady Flora, and the thundering voice of the knight calling and scolding his hounds. And flashing from the ceiling to the table, from the table to the floor, dashing under the chairs and slipping between people's legs, there bounded a russet arrow, and a black-tufted tail disappeared through the wide open door. In the end everything was clear, and they understood. Reynard, hiding among the skins and holding himself flat, with his tail hanging down, had let Beater come close to him. Then he turned round all at once, bit the outstretched hand with his canine tooth, and almost tore out a nail. Then he jumped down onto the table, seized a partridge larded with bacon from a silver dish, and simply took his leave. That was indeed Reynard, said Lord de la Fuye finally. Reynard, I salute you. Do not sound the horns tomorrow when the chains are let down and he runs across the bridge. A little later we'll hunt a stag.